Hey Stampers, Kim from stampingimperfection.com. Thanks for joining me today. I shared this project, or a video of making this project last week. This is a small canvas. It's a 4x4 canvas, and I was trying out distress crayons for the first time. So I tried them on canvas. I thought that seemed like fun. I had seen a video somewhere and felt inspired, so I wanted to create my own fall creation. And now I want to enter, there's a flower challenge, a fall flower challenge at Stamps Ink and Paper, and I wanted to share my attempt at using the watercolor crayons on watercolor paper, because I have not yet done that. So I'm actually using, this is not technically a fall stamp, I'm actually using Daisy Delight from Gina Designs, and I love this big flower image. I just love, love, love it. I'm not sure that I'll use one of the sentiments on this particular card, but I definitely want to use this big image. And I'm going to really emphasize the center and then use fall colors to make it look sort of like a sunflower. So that's my plan. So I've got a piece of cold press cardstock, and I believe this is cut at 4. This is cut at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I'm using, cold press paper has quite a bit of texture, so I'm using the smoothest side because I want to heat emboss this. And I'm going to emboss it with this Nuvo embossing powder that I have here, and it is called Copper Blush. I have not yet tried this, and I'm looking forward to trying this. So I'm going to use my Mini Misty to start with, just so I can stamp this more than one time. So I'm stuffing this way down in the quarter, and I want to put my flower toward the top in the center, and then I want to add a sentiment at the bottom. So, and maybe even some twine, because there's nothing like twine on a fall card. Some just regular old linen thread or burlap twine or something. That natural element I always feel like adds to fall themed projects. Okay, so I'm going to stamp this a couple times because I can barely see this, and I know my ink pad is freshly inked, although I haven't been embossing with it a lot lately. Still not seeing it. Maybe time to re-ink it. I feel like I've been embossing everything lately. I got some new embossing colors from Holtz, and it's been fun trying them out. Okay, that's probably good. Alright, so I'll close this up, and I'm going to bring in a little card here just to pour this on. I actually was tempted to use Altenews Rose Gold. I have 2 rose golds that I like a lot. One is from Altenews and one is from Gina K, and they're 2 completely different colors. It's amazing the difference between the 2. I like this. It looks like it'll be perfect for watercoloring. The image actually, I think, is going to lend itself well to being a sunflower too. Gina K has gorgeous flowers. Gorgeous flowers for coloring in. And she's got just different sets of flowers for the entire year. So I set this with my heat tool, and now I'm just going to tape it down with some frog tape. And this is actually great tape. It holds it down, it won't tear your paper. It comes in this nice case, which I really like because my basement is very humid, and a lot of times when I have tape for a little while, it'll actually start sticking to itself, and then it doesn't work as well to peel off paper. So this is nice. You want to keep that in that case. So now I'm just trying to, I'm actually pulling out a piece of scrap watercolor paper and using a little bit of one of the crayons on there and just wetting my brush. I want to test this out to see if I put a line down, will that line be there? Like, will it stay? Or am I going to be able to like wipe it away? And it looks like I'm going to be able to see that line. So I definitely want to be careful. And I'm thinking that I'm probably going to pre-wet the paper. So I'll do a wet on wet technique. And I'm pulling out some clean water because I really should have clean water to use on my painting. Those are perfect jars. Luckily my son likes that brand of jelly that comes in those jars. So I'm just, trying it again, and that line's still there. So I'm gonna wet a few leaves, and I'm just gonna do a few at a time. And since this is the first time I've used these on watercolor paper, I'm really experimenting. So it actually starts to move already without me doing anything with the brush. And I'm using one of my bigger brushes. This is probably, I think this is a round brush number 8. And I'm going to switch to a smaller brush because I don't feel like I have as much control. Usually I like bigger brushes. I switch to a 4. And I'm trying to pull that color out. I'm trying to keep it darker toward the center and then pull it out toward the edges of the leaf. And the thing with these crayons is that as long as the crayon is still wet, you can actually move the color around. Once that color dries, that layer is pretty much permanent. Like, you can blend it with other colors, or you can, add more water and pull the color out until it's dry. Once it's dry, then you can layer other colors on top, but you can't do anything more with that layer that you already did. But while it's wet, you can do everything you can do with normal watercolors. You can, pull some water away and lighten the color. You can add more colors and blend them together. So I'm trying, dotting some on. I'm just trying different ways to put color on there to see what's working best, whether, that whole line or some dots works best. Either way seems to work okay. I get more color at the base by putting a line at the base rather than the dots, because you can see the top ones are a little darker yellow in the center than the bottom ones. So I'm re-wetting the rest of them. And I'm putting a good amount of water on because I don't want it to dry out before I get to them. I actually did quite a few at the same time there. And I'm going to be honest, I really fuss with this a lot. Like, I wanted some color variety in there. Perhaps if I had dried this and then put more yellow on top, but I really wanted some brown. My plan was to put some brown in the center and then pull some of that brown into the petals. So I pull out, this is Vintage Photo, and I'm putting a little bit down toward the center because I want to make the center darker, and I want it to look almost like there's some depth to that center. I don't know if I ever actually achieve it here, but I'm experimenting, so it's okay if it's not perfect. And I'm trying to move some of the color from the really dark spots where I put that crayon directly down to the top. And now I'm going to add some orange, just because it's fall colors. You've got to have some orange in there, even though sunflowers don't really have a lot of orange in them. And then I'm going to do the same thing and try to like pull some of that orange out and put it, I'm going to add it to some of the larger petals near it, just so I get a more uniform color, because I don't want just orange in behind and not have a little bit of it in front. And again, I just really fuss with this. There's probably a point I should have stopped when I was just doing the yellow, but I didn't. I continued on. So far I have not found a watercolor technique that I have not found totally relaxing. So again, I'm adding some more of that yellow, and that yellow, by the way, is fossilized amber. I just really love that color. I think it's wonderful. And these watercolor crayons are so creamy. If you, years ago, Stampin' Up! Had Watercolor Wonder crayons that were exactly like this, and they were super creamy, except that they were like actual crayons and they had paper around them. These these plastic pen-like cases that turn like lipsticks or chapsticks, like this is actually really nice. Like they don't break. Like I used to use those watercolor wonder crayons quite a bit, and I a lot of mine actually got broken. Um, so I'm trying to put some color on the tips here. I'm just really now thinking, oh, I've got a mess here. This is looking really messy, like mud, but more like a sunflower than a daisy. So I just keep playing, keep adding some yellow, keep adding some brown, keep like I'm trying to keep it wet so I can just get the shading the way I want it, but I don't know how that's working. I'm enjoying it, and that's actually the most important thing. After a long day of work, if you can sit and watercolor and play and try something new and experiment and, you know, embrace the imperfections, then that's a good evening. That whole center is really embossed, and that is actually a really pretty color. I know they call it copper blush, um, and it does have quite a nice copper color with a hint of red or something in it. It's actually really pretty. It's also very shiny. And when I'm all done, I'm actually going to, when this is all dry and I'm all done with this project, I will actually take a paper towel and just buff that whole thing so that I take any of the crayon off the embossed parts, because they really do resist the color. So I don't know what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to shade and get like a light side and a dark side, and I decide maybe I should stop here. I'll dry this a little bit. So I take out my heat tool, and I'm using the low setting, mostly because I'm trying to be quiet, because my husband's also making a video in the other room, and I don't really want to move the color around anymore. I'm actually kind of enjoying it. So I decided I want to see if I can lighten it up in some points. So I pull out the antique linen crayon here and put that like toward the center of the petal, on the edge of the petal. And since I started it, I might as well do every petal. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm not sure how much you can see it, but I do feel like in person I can see that it's lighter at those spots. But I don't really feel like stopping because I'm enjoying this. So I'm going to keep going. There is going to be a point where I have to give up, though. There are lots of things you can do with these watercolor crayons, by the way. You can actually color directly onto a stamp, spritz it with water. I'll do a video on that next. But, you know, that's the first technique I learned, and the reason I bought those watercolor crayons and used them to death, because you can color directly onto a stamp, spritz it with your distress sprayer, and then stamp onto your paper, and you get the most gorgeous watercolor effect. I would use that technique on a solid stamp. It wouldn't work for something like this. This is an outline stamp, and you want to use a stamp that's got solid petals, and you get really a very pretty watercolor technique. So I'm still using the same color, and I don't know if I told you that orange, by the way, is Rusty Hinge, which I also quite like, and I actually like the hint of orange in there. So I'm going to stop with the flower, and now I want to add some green because I really liked the
canvas project, when I added the green, I feel like there should be some green in a fall project. So that green I just put down, and I probably should have dried this first and then put the green down, because remember, this needs to stay wet, but I was quick. That's peeled paint. And I really want it super watered down. The more water you add, the lighter that color is going to be. So I'm adding quite a bit of water because I want to use this as a background, but I want to keep it light because I can't take that color away very well. I can to a point, but it's never going to completely go away. So if I keep it light, um, I can always add more color, which of course I like to do because I just can't leave it alone. What is it about watercoloring that you start it and then all of a sudden you just can't leave it alone? So I'm doing around the outside. I'm trying to, that tape's getting in the way. I'm going to have to fix that later. I should have peeled the side and the top tape off, and because that's going to leave a little line, but that's okay. This is mostly an experiment. I just keep playing, but then I am struck by the idea. I did that shadow effect was one of the techniques I learned in one of the marker classes that I took. So I thought, I wonder if you can do that with watercolor. So I decided I would try to make a darker, like not water down that crayon quite so much. Just water it down a little bit so that it's darker, because if I add less water, I get a darker color. And then I'm going to go along the left side and the bottom edge of anything that's left and bottom. I'm going to go around that with the darker color, and I'm kind of liking how that's turning out, but it's not quite giving me the effect I want. Like when I did it on the card that I did the video on, um, I used a gray marker. Here I'm using the same color as my background, and I'm kind of wishing I was using a gray marker. So instead, I'm going to pull out the black soot distress crayon. I'm going to clean up what I have done here. I got myself a new one of those Ranger mats because my other one was really getting cruddy. I'm going to dry this really well because I don't want, if I'm going to add black soot, I don't want it blending with anything, so I want that completely dry. And what am I doing with this yellow here? I forget. I think I had a couple. Oh, I know. I wanted to brighten the yellow. When I dried it, I realized it wasn't as bright as I wanted it to be, so I decided I'm going to add a little bit more yellow to the base of each of those petals because I want it to look a lot brighter than it's looking. And I accidentally didn't do the base of that one, so I wiped it off with paper towel. While it's wet, you can do all the things you do with watercolors. You can take a paper towel and blot up the excess water, and that'll take some of the color back. And but I kind of like that this is actually looking brighter now as I do this. Yeah, I can still see the orange. I'm not covering up the orange because that's already dry. Now I'm adding another layer of color on top of that. So, and I feel like it has some dimension, but I want to give it more dimension. So I'm going to take that black soot crayon and I'm just going to try it in a little spot. Not going to be big and bold here. I'm trying out the color on that scrap paper. Those little pieces that you end up with when you trim your cardstock down, don't throw those out. Those are perfect for testing out colors. And by the way, I'm using my number 4 round brush here. Still, actually, for whatever reason with the crayons, I like that smaller brush. With my watercolor paints, I really like the big brush. I think the big brush holds a lot of water, and I feel like I can get the paint to do a lot more that I'd like to do with it. With these, I really seem to want less water, so I'm going around the left-hand sides and the bottom, and I realize, oh, that's the bottom. I need to go back and do all the bottoms of all those petals, and I really like this drop shadow effect. Like, I love it with the marker. I've done a couple videos where I use the drop shadow effect on florals. There's an autumn leaves one And I really like that it's giving this flower a lot of dimension. Like it's making it pop off that um, paper a little bit more. So I'm peeling this back and realizing I'm going to have to fix that one right-hand side edge. So I'm going to add just a touch more of the green to a couple spots. And I'm not going to get rid of that line, but I can camouflage it a little bit. I'm not going to worry about it anyway. And I'm going to add a little bit to the bottom, just very lightly on the bottom, because that's where I'm going to put my sentiment. And I actually am okay with how this turned out, considering it was my first time playing with the distressed crayons, and I haven't played with the watercolor wonders in a long time because Stampin' Up! Got rid of those years ago. So it's actually really fun to play with this medium again, I have to say. So I hit it again with my heat gun, and I actually used the powder bag there. So since this could potentially still be a little wet, I just wanted to make sure, pardon my head, that no embossing powder would stick to the wet card in places I didn't want. I'm looking at the back of that because I want to let you know that this is Gina K. This is Wealth of Wishes, and I got this as a freebie because Gina K, when you place orders of a certain amount, I think it's $75, but you have to check. I'll put the Gina K links below for these products, but she will send usually or very often a free stamp set. So I got this wonderful Wealth of Wishes stamp set for free, and it's got a lot of great sentiments. I especially love this one because it's script and it says, "You make my heart bloom," which seems like a perfect thing to put with a big bloom like that. So I'm using that copper, what is it called? Copper Blush Nuvo embossing powder again. So I'm just going to hit that with my heat tool. And notice that I'm doing the back. This paper is so thick, and I like to heat up the back because you have to warm up all of that paper before your embossing powder is going to melt. And notice that I'm also holding it off the table so I'm not heating up the surface. That was actually a tip I got from an online class, one of Tim Holtz's online classes. He said, lift it off the table and it will actually melt faster. And I'm, again, using the low setting because I'm trying to be as quiet as possible. But this sentiment is really looking super shiny. And this is the moment that I realized that I try to hit the rest of the flower to see if I can bring out some of that shine. So this is the moment that I realized I need to bring in a paper towel and just buff that up to give it a little bit more shine. And you can see that gray around the edge, and it really does make that flower look like it's popping off the top. And that really made that embossing powder shine, or that embossing, the embossed image very shiny again. And you can see the shine there. So I pull out a piece of persimmon cardstock that I got from Simon Says Stamp. I think it was a Simon Says Stamp kit that I got. And this is the leftover. I'm going to use that for a card base. That's 4¼ by 5½, and 4¼ by 11, and I scored it at 5½, and used my Teflon bone folder in my mini score buddy, which I really like. It's very handy because it fits nicely on your desk and it's not, in the way. I'm using my favorite 3M tape. I like to use this when I watercolor on watercolor paper because it helps you straighten it out, because that watercolor paper warps a little tiny bit. So I'm going to center this in the middle. And then I remember that, I really wanted to do my black splatter because I'm loving the black splatter lately. So I pull out my Distress Oxide Black Soot, smush it onto my craft mat, spritz it with my Distress sprayer, and then I use my gigantic brush, which is a 12 round brush. And I just want to do, I don't want to do the whole card. I just want to sort of do diagonally across the card. And I want to make sure I get toward the bottom and the top so you can see it. I want a little bit on top of the flower, but I really want quite a bit or quite a few drops to show on the bottom left and the upper right. I don't want to do the whole card front because I feel like that is too much. It's like sponging. There's a point where you're sponging and blending and you should stop because there's a point of too much sponging. I feel that way with the splatter too. That Black Soot Distress Oxide ink is my favorite one. It's when it dries, it's sort of gray, but I really like it. If you want darker black, then use something other than the Distress Oxide. I have not tried the Distress Inks, and I'll have to try those. I do like using actually my permanent black or my jet black inks. Either one of those works really well from my Altenew inks. And the Catherine Pooler inks work really well also. Those also make nice black splatters, but that black soot has become my favorite. So now this is a fall mix of sequins that I got in a Simon Says stamp kit last year. And I love the combination of, there's a combination of like orangey, yellowy colors and clear, sort of iridescent ones. And I love the mix of sizes. When you buy sequins, you can get like mixed sizes, or you can get like all like 4mm, 6mm, 8mm. Like you can get all one size, or you can get the mix of sizes. I really like the mix of sizes. That's my quick stick and my multimedia mat. And that's going to complete my card. So give this video a like, share with your friends. Make sure you stop by my blog at stampingimperfection.com and check out the links below. Thanks for watching.